Good afternoon. It looks like it is 12 o'clock. Mr. Coley, can you call the meeting to order, please? Call the roll, I'm sorry.
Yes. Commissioner Caballero,
Present.
Commissioner Feinbaum,
Present.
Commissioner Gibson, Commissioner Hamilton,
Here.
Commissioner Herbert,
Here.
Commissioner Simpson Brown,
Here.
and Commissioner Small.
Present and accounted for.
They're all here.
We're all here. So hopefully we all had a chance to review the minutes from our February meeting. Do I have a motion for approval of those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So for today's meeting, we have an official action of Resolution 1474. I recognize Gabe to bring that to us.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners, Daniel Kimball, manager of our procurement and storeroom, did such a great job last month. I've asked him to come back this month
Yes.
to look at another piece of property that we're looking for disposal. So, Daniel, you have the floor.
Yep. Yeah, so thanks, Gabe. As Gabe mentioned, I was here last month, and I don't know if you know it or not, but I set a Guinness World Book of Records by the shortest presentation so that we've done. So I've been challenged today to do it again, so here I am. We do have, in all seriousness, we do have another resolution for a transfer of some property. So this one is 0 Stevenson Drive. It's over on the University of Tennessee's campus, right behind our Kauai wastewater treatment plant. It's 1.34 acres. It basically surrounds the railroad that borders our Kauai treatment plant property. State of Tennessee and UT are requesting that we transfer it to the University of Tennessee so they can do a vegetation screen. They want to go out and plant some trees. It separates the soccer fields as well as the softball fields from our treatment plant. So aerial view, just to see it here, University of Tennessee is up north on the northern half. KUB properties in our plan is down at the bottom. You can see the softball field to the left and the soccer fields there in the middle. The 1.34 acres, last month it was 21 square feet, so this month it's 1.34 acres. It literally parallels, though, the railroad. The railroad goes right through the middle of it, and it separates. UT is going to plant some trees on the northern side of that. We've looked at it operationally, and we're good with it. They're working with the railroad right now to make sure they get the proper separation for the trees and the vegetation so it does not impact our operations of our facility. This next map just depicts it a little bit cleaner and clearer to where you can see it. And again, just like last month, this resolution 1474 authorizes the sale and disposal of that, of which we would transfer to the state of Tennessee on behalf of UT.
Does the railroad have an easement on this property?
If they've got an easement or not, I don't know that specifically, but they've got the right to be there.
But they've been notified.
Yes, they've been notified. We've been talking with them, and the University of Tennessee has been talking with them over the last few weeks as well.
That is where that Three Rivers Rambler, or what's called, that goes, that little spur, it goes back and
Yes.
forth. That's what they use that for. So it's not like it's a long haul rail. It's more of that just back and forth rail back there, but yes.
Will this be sold or donated to them?
Donated again. We got this from the city of Knoxville in 2012 when they were cleaning up some property transfers and assigning stuff over to us. So we took it then, and now we would transfer it to UT or to the state of Tennessee.
You took this exact parcel from the city of Knoxville?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep. What else? Any other questions? Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments on the board? So can we have a motion and a second for Resolution 1474 on first and final reading?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board on this particular resolution? Seeing none, Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll for the vote?
Commissioner Caballero.
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Feinbaum. Aye. Commissioner Gibson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Small.
Abstain.
Resolution 1474 has passed on first and final reading.
Turn my mic off. Next, I'd like to recognize Gabe for his president's report.
Thank you, Commissioners. As you know, we've had the Community Advisory Panel meeting with us for the last few years, and they've given us a lot of great input on policies and things we can do to reach out to our customers. I've asked Liz Hanna, Manager of our Executive Services and Environmental Stewardship, to give you an update on all the things we've discussed with them and their suggestions back to us. Thank you, Liz.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As Gabe said, the panel has continued to meet regularly to provide input for KUB, and we greatly appreciate their service. I know several of you have attended their meetings and hear from them directly. You also receive their detailed meeting minutes and the link to view the recording of their meetings. Over the past few meetings, they've discussed input for some of our sustainability initiatives, and that is what I'd like to share with you today. I'll be sharing the highlights, and you have a full copy of their input in your packets today. So this board has strongly supported our weatherization assistance partnerships over the last many years, and we're really pleased to be at a point where at this time, almost $30 million has been contributed to supporting customers with this type of assistance through our partnerships and our customer participation in Rounded Up, and this board's annual commitment to put $1 million towards serving customers. So since 2015, we've now served over 2,400 customers with weatherization assistance. And several months ago, we'd gotten to the point where the pace of applications was beginning to slow down a bit. So the panel met, and they were asked to give us suggestions for how we can effectively share information about these programs with eligible customers and encourage them to apply. So since that time, I'm glad to say that applications have picked back up to the level that we'd like to see. So customers have been made aware, and they are applying, and the work is continuing as we'd like to see to utilize the funding for this year. The panel was very helpful with their suggestions, and also since the time of their meeting, we have developed a new partnership with SEED, and they are assisting us with outreach related to this program, and I'll comment just a bit more about that in a moment. During another meeting, the panel was asked to give us input on energy efficiency programs that KUB could consider if we were to attract additional funding sources, such as through the federal grants that we're closely monitoring at this time. We asked them what kinds of new initiatives could we consider undertaking if that type of funding became available. So they gave us a lot of great suggestions, which are reflected on the slide. And as you can see, when you look at those suggestions, some of these things really don't require additional funding to get started with. So we've been able to dig into that and make some headway. Shown on the slide is an image of a recent social media post to promote our time of use rates program. So that's something that we were looking at as that pilot was started as a pilot. We wanted to start slowly and make sure that it was working well for the customers that initially enrolled, but we were ready to take next steps. So we did recently put that out, as well as a news release, and we've updated our website content, and the KUB team has also been sending direct mail letters to customers who appear that they may benefit from considering this type of rate structure. So that is one example. And then as you'll see, the last bullet is about raising more awareness for the energy and water workshops that we offer. A moment ago, I mentioned the new partnership with SEED, and so they just this week kicked off their first workshop, and they'll be offering a monthly workshop over the next year in partnership with us. And in addition to that, they'll be starting some door-to-door neighborhood canvassing to share energy and water saving tips with customers, and also sharing that awareness about the weatherization assistance program as they do that. So we were really happy to get that kicked off with them. And of course, we have our own KUB Community Relations team who also helps promote these workshops and make them available for customers. And then lastly, as you know, we're very excited to be approaching the launch of our community solar project, Knoxville's first community solar project that you know well about. In January, the panel actually met at the city's Public Works complex so they could see firsthand the solar array. And next month, we will be launching the subscription program to customers. So we wanted the panel's input on how can we market this program to help customers be aware of it and understand the benefits of it so that they could consider subscribing. So we were really happy to hear from the panel. They gave us a lot of good suggestions, and they were very enthusiastic. In fact, a lot of their input was around their thoughts that there will be a high demand and they think it will be quickly subscribed and that we should be looking ahead to a next project. So I know this board is strongly supportive of our renewable energy projects, and you know that we're working on future opportunities as well, so we'll be looking ahead. But they did give us some specific suggestions as we market the program, as we have started more, as we approach the launch, and said that we should highlight the environmental benefits and things like how participation in a community program like this can benefit someone rather than investing in solar individually. So our customers can just be aware of the options available to them. So that is the highlights of the panel's input. And again, you have the full copy in your packets. If you have questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
I do have a question. Thank you so much for the presentation. Could you go to the first slide?
Sure.
So did they expand on the, no, I'm sorry, the second slide, I guess.
Okay.
Did they expand in the definition of weatherization for all income levels?
They did. So we have had the weatherization partnership since 2015 to serve low-income customers. And some of the panel members indicated that if additional funding became available, they think it would be great to have weatherization assistance incentives or some type of program for all income levels to improve the housing stock in our area.
How is the backlog of weatherization going? At some point during the pandemic, there was like more people than we could help weatherize homes, and the process was still being figured out. Where are we on that? Is there a wait list for people? Because probably a year ago, we were talking about a wait list of
Yes.
a year.
Yes. So the wait list did drop dramatically. That CAC had been holding for some time. We have the newer partnership with TVA and Clear Results, so they ramped up also. And that's where we came to the point with those partners in seeing that they actually weren't receiving enough applications and that wait list had declined. And now that we've raised awareness, there is a smaller wait list, but it's not nearly to the level that it was in those years past with a big backlog. But we know there is still a strong need among our low-income customers, so we knew we need to continue to get the word out to that target audience and make sure that they're aware and encouraged to apply, and also just facilitate ways to make it as easy as possible for them to apply.
Thank you.
Do you know if the 211 operators have information about these programs if someone calls in with a concern about their energy bills?
Yes, and the city of Knoxville has been a strong partner in this relationship as well, so we meet with their sustainability office monthly, and they are always helping us look at ways we can promote programs, and they can help amplify our messaging.
Could you explain a little bit more about the SEED partnership?
Sure. So we met with SEED, SACE, the Sierra Club, and 3KUB, and we talked to them about this need related to our weatherization assistance partnerships, and they put together a proposal to kick off this project with us. And so that includes the monthly workshop hosted by SEED to share the energy and water savings information and to help facilitate applications to the weatherization assistance partnership, and then that door-to-door canvassing that I mentioned where they can work in target areas and look at what areas have been heavily served in the past and where there may be some gaps that appear customers may need this kind of assistance, and go out and spread the word.
What might exist for maybe non-native English speakers, so customers who may need things translated in Spanish or other languages? Do we have some of that available?
We do, and in fact, yesterday we had the Community Expo, and those materials were presented in English and Spanish, and weatherization was featured there with a table set up to take applications. Do you want to say anything more about the?
And Claudia would be great at sharing some of the things that we've done with Centro as well from a non-English speaking community. We recognize just through Claudia and our interactions with her that many people weren't utilizing the service that were Spanish speaking. And so we have worked closely with Centro as well as TVA to make some improvements overall to the program, the application process, as well as just our overall process for establishing utility services. So we will continue to do that work as we hear about additional things that may be barriers for different populations. So we'll continue to work through those things.
Now, I don't know if you were on the board at the time, Claudia, but we had a sort of a mini presentation of what you can do to have your home more energy efficient. And I learned a lot from that, and I think that, you know, there's some education about energy efficiency that we can do with all income levels, just to make sure that people are getting, doing little things. That was the thing that surprised me most about that presentation, were small things that you could do that would greatly improve your energy efficiency. And I think the more that we can get that message out to a whole range of people, you know, the better it'll be. You weren't, it was really an interesting presentation, and we just got the like mini version of it. But I mean, it might be something to
Yeah.
consider doing again, just because it's a really instructional
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah, and I'm glad you reminded me of that. We did bring up some of our folks and did some of the demos, like had the props and the showing the things. We actually had those yesterday at the expo also. And it's been a little while now with COVID and the whole
Right.
change. I'd kind of forgotten about that. So we'll definitely look at that again. That's a good idea. Thank you.
And with our partnership with Seed, they're actually utilizing those interactive displays you saw. So we are taking those over for their workshops, and their employees have learned how to do those demos that you saw, and they're using that as part of their workshop.
That's great.
Liz, yeah, I was gonna say, Liz, before you turn the floor back over to Gabe, just send our thanks to the panel. I mean, these, just looking through some of the recommendations, this is some good work, and I think they really have tied in to some really significant community organizations that can help get the word out about what we do. I'm a fan of multiple chances, multiple choices, and so, you know, maybe you hear it in your faith-based community, maybe you hear it with nonprofits, maybe you hear it in community groups. And so I think the more that we could, you know, talk about what we do, talk about the opportunities that we have, I think the better. So I think all of these are really great recommendations, and so send our thanks to the panel.
Thank you. We'll do that.
Thank you very much for the questions. Appreciate that a lot. Commissioners, I want to recognize Mark Walker, our Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. He is going to give you a current year, fiscal year update on where we're at and how things are going. So, Mark.
Yeah, it's an exciting time of the year.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. Unlike Daniel, I won't be setting any records for brevity, but anyway, as you know, next month at the April workshop, we'll be discussing the proposed budget for our fiscal year 24. Today, we want to share with you an update on where we are on our fiscal year 23 budget performance. It's similar to a report that we shared with the board's Audit and Finance Committee at their February meeting, and today we wanted to share it with the full board. A couple things to keep in mind before we get started. One is the numbers that you're going to see today are based upon 8 months of actual performance and 4 months of forecasted data. So if somewhere during my presentation I say 8 plus 4, that's what I'm referring to. And then second, and probably to no one's surprise, inflation has had a significant impact on our operating cost, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as we get into it. But, so, last May, the board approved a total budget appropriations of $1.11 billion for all 5 utility divisions combined. Based upon our current forecast, we are projected to be about $14.3 million over budget. Now, there's a lot of, in our cost categories, they're going different ways on this. The biggest is our wholesale energy cost. It is up combined with what we purchase from TVA, what we purchase from our gas suppliers, $72 million, or about 15% over budget. And you may recall, we talked back in the fall and the summer, energy prices, natural gas prices in particular, were rising dramatically. We were close to $10 a decatherm back in the summer. And that also has an impact on electric because a lot of electric power generation across the nation is now fueled by natural gas plants, natural gas plants. And so it sort of becomes circular. You know, the greater the demand for natural gas drives up natural gas prices, drives up the cost of electric power generation. TVA's generation mix is about 26% of their current mix is by natural gas fuel plants. So it has that impact. So that was our big one at $72 million over budget. O&M is projected to be $9 million over budget. And again, inflation is really the reason for that. We haven't added any new programs per se, nothing substantive. It's just that things are costing more. And we'll go through some of those items here in just a moment. On the capital side of the house, down $60 million compared to budget. And there's sort of four major areas, and it's really all impacted by timing. That eventually those dollars will be spent, but it's just timing on some major projects, and we'll talk about that as well. But from a board action perspective, what we'll be bringing to the board back in May is a request for additional budget appropriations for the electric and natural gas divisions in order for them to fully fund, those divisions to be fully funded and be able to pay all their expenditures. And again, that's really driven by the significant increases in wholesale energy cost. On the revenue side, revenues are close to $70 million over budget. So big part of that is the flow through of those higher wholesale energy prices to our customers. And there is, we talked about this with the Audit and Finance Committee. It doesn't line up directly, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, because you might say, well, one's up 72 million, why isn't that up at least 72 million? There's other parts to that we'll talk about. But still, revenues are up a hefty amount, as you would expect. And also, really more so on the water and wastewater systems, higher than expected sales, in particular for our commercial customers, has helped those two divisions respectively. And then just from a total cash perspective, looking at it division by division, cash positions are solid. And now the timing on the capital has maybe inflated those levels somewhat, but those dollars will eventually be spent. But even underlying that, we're in a solid position cash-wise. So looking at our O&M, our operating cost on that, what are some of the items that have been impacted significantly? Well, employee wages. You may recall last year we actually had two pay increases for our employees. One occurred in June, which was after the budget was approved, and then we had the regular pay for performance cycle in September. And that was an effort to keep our wages competitive, to help with employee retention, and help them keep pace with inflation as well on that. So wages, payroll is about $2 million over budget. Now, we are still somewhat well below our approved staffing plan, so that number would have been higher if we were closer to being able to fill our fully staff in accordance with our plan. Chemicals for water and wastewater treatment, obviously those are vital, but we have seen some significant price increases in chemicals, and that just varies depending on what the chemical is, but we've seen some in excess of 70% over what was planned, some in excess of 100% higher than what was planned. Altogether, that's driven up our chemical cost about $2 million over budget. And then you really see it's the same story almost. Fuel is up, utilities are up, as our energy prices are up and our rates have gone up. We pay those rates too. In particular, water, wastewater pays a lot to electric because they use a lot of electric power with their remote sites and their treatment plants and their pumping stations. So we've seen the cost of utilities up almost $1 million. And then materials and supplies are also up. Contractors, in particular for the electric system where we use more outside contractors, their labor costs are going up, just general inflation. So they pass that on to the companies that they work for. So we're seeing like traffic control up $600,000 over budget. Vegetation management, $1.5 million over budget. And electric line maintenance contractors up about $1 million over budget. So when we look at it divisionally, you'll see the electric system is really bearing the highest burden of these increased costs. Any questions on that?
Mark,
Yes, sir.
you said that you'd be coming back to this board for an increase for FY '23?
For the budget, for additional budget appropriations for the electric and gas divisions. Because-
Which two divisions?
Electric and gas.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, we have a chart here in a moment that'll show what those projected overages are for both electric and gas.
My next question.
Okay. On the capital side, we talked about timing, and these are the areas that timing has impacted the most. First is on fiber. We have had some delays in being able to roll out the fiber services. We've had some, I guess you might call unprecedented supply chain constraints with respect to electronics, with respect to getting bucket trucks in. All that ended up in some other issues as well, and resulted in an 8 to 11 month delay in actually being able to make these services available. So you'll see that in our revenue projections as well. But from a capital side, what we budgeted for fiber services to the home, we're about $18 million under budget for FY '23. And again, that is a timing issue. Eventually, those dollars will be spent. We have a 3-year new filter project at our MBW water treatment plant. It's $65 million. We had budgeted $25 million for the current fiscal year. We're going to spend about 12 in our revised forecast. But again, timing. And plus, we have some large grants that are going to help fund that as well. A number of wastewater pump station projects that are in various places across our system. Again, just timing issues on those. So that contributes. And then we had planned to put in a new customer information system this fiscal year. Our existing system is getting some age on it. In fact, it's actually more than 20 years old. So we are going to be putting that in, but we just deferred that 1 year to FY '24, and that's about $6 to $7 million right there. So,
Mark, question
Yes.
before you go to the next slide. With the issues that have caused the delays in these capital projects, do you see those easing up, or do you expect them to stay the same so that that delay is going to continue to ripple through the projects, if you know what I mean? I mean, and I know that's kind of you need a crystal ball answer, but I'm just wondering, is that delay still consistent with what we've been seeing as of right now?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We typically see, especially in these large projects and often related to our water and wastewater plants, that, we say we get it done in 2 years, and it usually takes a little bit longer than that. So some of this is supply chain driven,
Yeah.
and some of it is just, the timing of the projects taking a little bit longer.
My question really, didn't phrase it that well, was more toward the supply chain issues.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you're always gonna have things in big capital projects that's gonna cause slides, but do you see those supply chain issues getting any better yet?
They
or-
have gotten better.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in particular on the fiber, we've really addressed, I guess, the majority of those. Jamie can speak to this better than I can, but I think majority of that has been rectified. And we're doing better, and we are getting more and more customers every day on the fiber
And I'll add to
service.
that, Daniel, of course, overheads our storerooms, but it wasn't 8-10 months ago. I was walking through there, and it was as empty as I've seen it. It's just, we were starting to not run out, but run low on things. And transformers, poles, cable, fiber was all sort of, just hard to get. I think it's gotten better. I do know that we've got a lot of electric cable in recently, which was helped us get back on track with some projects. So I'm
Yes,
putting you on the
we've-
spot a little bit there, Daniel, but you live it.
We've had to get creative, I think, in how we order stuff and who we order stuff from. Generally speaking, I would say better, but incrementally better. It depends on what you're looking for. Mark mentioned trucks, so bucket trucks. So if you go back before the pandemic, we could place an order for a bucket truck and get it 6-8 months later. Now we see 3 to 5 years, just depending on who we get it from. Yeah, so we ordered stuff a couple years ago, and we're hoping to maybe get it this fall. So those type of things, transformers, You know, the stuff that we really focus on are poles, transformers, wire, when I'm thinking electric side of the house. And so we're being flexible and bidding alternate agreements to get secondary suppliers in place so that we can place some orders with other folks so that we've got something working over here while we're waiting on something coming from our normal supplier.
Yeah. But with respect to the projects that we're talking about here, I think the only one that was really impacted by supply chain is the fiber. Yeah. The fiber.
Our number one wish right now to be get a bucket truck, for instance. We can't splice enough because we can't get bucket trucks. And everybody did what we did, which was fill the queue up, internationally. Let me order now my next 3 to 5 years worth of stock so I can get in the queue. So that queue for vehicles is as full as it's probably ever been in that regard. And that's why that 3 to 5 year. So we're trying to find rentals that we can use. We're trying to find used vehicles. We never buy used vehicles, that kind of thing, just in order to keep things moving in that particular regard. So.
Okay. Now we get to the fun part and we actually look at the numbers. I know Commissioner Herbert's excited about this. So looking at it by division, on electric, you can see purchase energy, what we pay TVA, $57 million over budget. O&M, $8.5 million over budget, and many of those items I referenced, the electric division, just because of its size relative to the other divisions, bears more of shared costs. So of that increase in wages, it's going to have the majority of that. And the same for fuel, the same for contractors in particular. So a lot of increases impacting electric O&M. Capital down $27 million. Big part of that is the fiber services that we've already talked about. Debt services down $1.4 million. That's timing on the $79 million bond issue we had. And taxes and equivalents down $1.3 million. And that is because the city and county both had to lower their property tax rates to make up for the difference in the higher appraised property values. And we get the benefit of that. So we have some savings there. But in total, Commissioner Small, to look at what we're right now based on this forecast, electric is $35 million over budget. And on the gas side, $12 million over budget. So when we come back in May, we'll have another month of actual results on that. And so we'll know more and we'll be able to refine those numbers into the request that we actually make. And gas, the big driver, $15 million over budget for wholesale gas cost. On water, $1.7 million over in O&M, and that's labor, and that's chemicals, and that's utility costs primarily. Capital's down $16 million. $13 million of that is that water filter project just being spent in different years. And so in total, $15 million under budget for water. Wastewater O&M up $2.2 million. Same story as water, labor, chemicals, utilities. Capital down $12 million. The majority of those is pump station projects that we talked about. In total, $10 million under budget. Fiber, we put cost of goods sold, so that's what we pay to get video for TV services and such as that. It's down $3.8 million, again linked to not having as many customers as we had anticipated during this fiscal year. And O&M for fiber's down $3.8 million. That's about $2.1 million of that are those access and utilization fees that fiber pays to electric we talked about. So that's down in revenue for electric, but it saves some costs for the fiber division. And again, really a timing issue there. But in total, fiber is $8 million under budget. So these are the two that we, again, will be talking about more in early May, or in May with you. So that's expenditures, that's appropriations. Now let's look at revenues and how we're doing compared to budget. Electric is up $59 million on sales revenues. If you go back and you see, well, wholesale power costs were up $57 million, revenues are up about $2 million more than that. And we had maybe a slight increase in sales volumes in electric compared to budget, but the most of that is just last year we actually under-recovered our wholesale power cost. And so the way our rate setting mechanisms are set up, that automatically flows into the rates and we make it up the next year. And that really accounts for the difference. So in total, up $60 million. Gas is up almost $11 million over budget. And again, it's really the same issue if you go back and say, but we were 15 million up here, why are we only almost 11 million up there? It's the flip side. For gas, we actually over-recovered our wholesale gas cost last year by over $4 million. So that flows back. Those credits essentially flow back to our customers in lower rates. And that explains that delta there. Water up 1.9 million, wastewater up 3.4 million. Again, higher than expected commercial sales. So those are, from a financial perspective, that is helping. And then fiber, about $8.9 million under budget. We had budgeted $10 million in fiber sales revenue for the year. It's going to be about 1.2 million is what our forecast is now. And again, with those, I'm sorry, we budgeted 10 million for total fiber revenue, and now we're projected to be about 1.2 million. So that's because of the supply chain constraints that caused the delays. Yes, that's correct. So in total, fiber revenue about 8.7 million under budget. And when you put all the pieces together to see what the impact is on our cash position, starting with electric, you can see, it's a plus $25 million. You see for water, it's a plus $17 million. Wastewater, plus $15 million. But again, as you can see on the chart, really almost, not quite all, but in particular for electric, that's related to the capital timing. Water and wastewater get some boost from increased sales, which is good, but it's also impacted by capital timing. So cash positions are higher than what we expected them to be, but again, mostly just due to timing issues on that. But even if we had spent all those capital dollars, we would still be above our minimum target levels for all divisions except electric because of that high O&M. And that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Again, probably really no surprises for you. We know that inflation is going to have its impacts on us, and we're managing it the best we can. Okay.
I guess my question is really basic in terms of how do we usually pay for deficit when we have them in a budget? Like, where does that, because we balance it out with what we bring in versus expenses, so.
It's because the revenues are up. What the board does is only basically when it approves by action the expenditures. So when we exceed our expenditures, we need board action, but we have to show in our request for that we have a means to actually pay for that.
That was my question.
Which you'll see through the higher revenues that we have here, or just existing cash positions or whatever. There's a whole actually formula, and we'll provide spreadsheets to the board that we're required to provide that shows that we can fund those additional appropriations.
So right now what you're telling us is, hey, we're out of budget, we're over budget, we're going to spend more, but we also brought in more, and you're not asking us for anything right now. You're just you're not asking us to appropriate money or anything at this point. You're just letting us know.
Not till May, where we will ask for additional appropriations, but we'll also demonstrate that the funds are available to pay for those additional expenditures.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you. Just for clarification.
Any other questions?
I think, Mark, you answered my question. I was going to ask about strategy. So based on where we are, our financial position now, are we anticipating moving some capital projects back? Are we anticipating maybe moving some things out a year from now or 2 years from now? So as we think about where we are we at that point yet?
I think that, yes, because here we're just looking at a one-year snapshot.
Right.
But the inflationary impacts increase cost over year after year after year after year. And to a large extent, a new base has been set. So even as we've seen the rate of inflation come down, it peaked around 9% back in the summertime, and now it's down to about 6% on an annualized basis. But in our long-range plan, so we reset that base, but then our projections are still somewhat more along the historical inflation. So there's more to talk about at the April meeting on that, but it does have ramifications across the 10-year financial plans on this, on the higher cost and how we're going to address that, including funding of that, yes.
So since broadband is down about 90% over revenue expectation, though it's a small piece of obviously the big business, are you doing anything on the expense side to kind of pare those reductions even more? To kind of maybe save off of that 90% deficit?
Yeah, I think that as the supply chain kind of caught us there too, we delayed our rollout, we delayed our marketing efforts, we slowed down some staffing in that particular regard to try to time up that as well too. So now that we've kind of caught back up a little bit with that, we're kind of catching pace. What didn't slow down was like mainline construction. We kind of kept moving and going there. Our contractor was there. We had the supply there. So that's what's been nice is as those electronics have kind of come in and caught up, as we've been able to purvey these services, you know, we probably had about a 6 to 8 month delay on all of our marketing efforts in that regard. So that kind of, we've saved money in that time frame. We're able to kind of push that forward as well too in that particular regard. So I would say predominantly the savings there were really on the electric division side, on not O&M, but more so those capital services that Mark's talking about, because we're not going to extend those services until we have customers. And then on the other side, then some of that O&M on the fiber side, we were able to throttle back just a little bit as well too.
Because if you look at just the net cash impact on fiber was only $800,000 as expenses were down in the fiber division. So I think we have a target right now, as we're still getting into this, and it may change over time, about a $5 million ending cash balance in the early stages, and we're going to project it in the year about $11 million. So.
Commissioners, as you know, about 3 weeks ago on March 3rd, we had a pretty significant storm come through Knoxville and do a lot of damage. And I've asked Josh Johnson, our manager of operations, system operations, to give you an update on that storm and our response to that. So thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Bolus. Good afternoon, Commissioners. As Mr. Bolus stated, we're going to be updating you on the storm event that occurred on March 3rd with restoration efforts that occurred the next 2 days. That's Saturday and Sunday. If I can take you back to that week, so this is the last few days of February into the first few days of March. Predictions showed that we were going to have a heavy rainfall event prior to some sustained winds of about 30 miles per hour, and then wind gusts of 60 miles per hour. As the confidence of the forecast moved through that week, you can see we even had tornado risk starting to encroach into our area. With forecasts such as this, we always begin pre-planning before these events, right? So we ensured we want to know what kind of crews were available, both KUB, on-system KUB, contract crews, as well as off-system crews. And then we also developed our incident command structure for that weekend because the confidence was increasing that this event was going to impact our electric system. So we actually planned through 4 operating periods for the weekend to make sure that we were staffed and ready. So unfortunately, the forecasters got it right this time. And you can see by that snapshot of the outage map, we did have significant impact across the system. We did see those straight line winds, but what was interesting about this storm front, rain came through, it rained hard for about an hour, and then it became sunny. We still had those sustained winds of about 30 miles an hour, but then 3-4 hours later, we got straight line winds of 60 plus. And we could actually watch this storm front come across the state by watching other people's or other utilities' outage maps. We watched Memphis, we watched Nashville, and we knew it was coming. You walk outside and it was nice and pretty outside. So when those storms hit, at our peak, we saw about 27,000 customers without power. And then those sustained winds continued during restoration efforts. So once it was safe for crews to go out into the system, we did have 12 substation breakers locked out in the first 30 minutes of the event. But once the crews got out, they saw a lot of tree damage across the system. You can see by these photos, customers were impacted all across the system. We what was interesting about this event, it wasn't focused in one part of the area, it was across the entire service area, right? And it was a lot of smaller outages. So it may be 2 or 3 customers that may have a pole broke. So we could work 8 to 10 hours on a pole, get 3 customers back online, but you didn't see that impact on getting customers back, right? We replaced about 40 poles. There were quite a few transformers that had to be replaced. And then I remember one job, there were 8 spans of wires down. So that's a significant job to put back up. Now, the trees that we saw, you can see by some of those pictures, really came outside of our trim zone. So it may have been across the street from us. It may have been 50, 60 feet away from us. So as those trees fell into us, they had quite a bit of velocity and they caused a lot of damage all across our system. So with over 400 individual outage events, it did take some time to do restoration efforts. So with that ICS, the incident command structure in place, we were able to support crews throughout the weekend. They worked around the clock. You can kind of see by the graph that we peaked out at about 27,000, but then that restoration effort took a long time. It took 48 hours to get the system back up. We had 56 KUB and on-system contract crews working the system. We had 7 off-system crews and actually one from Bristol that came down and helped. And as I said, we watched that storm front come across Tennessee. Off-system crews were really hard to find because everyone had been damaged, not just Tennessee, but all across this region. 23 vegetation and tree crews were out on the system. I think they responded to 48 jobs, so there were 48 tree incidents where they had to go out and clear for crews. And then we had 12 damage assessment crews that spent Saturday out helping us assess damage so that we could be efficient on getting crews out to the right kind of job and with the right kind of materials. So over 80% of the customers were restored in that first 6 hours of the event, but due to the damage and how widespread it was across the service area, it took 48 hours to complete the restoration. Social media had a lot of really good comments. I think everybody experienced the wins that we saw and they understood the damages, but I want to thank all the KUB crews and operations staff and all the support staff that helped with that event. It went really smoothly. I also want to thank KUB's employee families because they sacrifice, that weekend and that Friday for those employees to help customers' needs. So thank you for all their hard work.
What's significant to me about this is the fact that we had all of these workers that were engaged in responding, and we didn't have any injury incidents with our employees. And I think that speaks very well to the training and the emphasis on safety, because anytime you go out in these situations, there are a lot of unknowns, and everybody is well trained as to how to respond, and that's really significant, because getting everybody back on in 48 hours is great, but getting everybody back home with all of our employees safe is even better.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I want to thank KUB because I was one of the very last people to get power in South Knoxville, and we went to my sisters were in town. We went to hang out at a friend's house in Louisville because yet there was no power, and the teams were in front of I'm on Maryville Pike. Right. The teams were out at midnight when we were coming back, right in front of the lane, working on the power line. So I was really grateful. I saw them working in South Knoxville a lot. And I also saw a lot of the tree damage that was just people are told, hey, this tree is in a dangerous place, and they don't want to do anything. So I wanted to say thank you as well, because it was a really, I saw teams all over, and I know how much work that was in not just weekend, but also just dangerous conditions, as Celeste says. So I'm very grateful. They were all very professional, very awesome. So it was great to see. I'm from Honduras, where we can have 3 days without power, so I was like, oh well. We hung out somewhere else for the day and a half, but yeah, it really did hit hard there. So thank you for your whole team.
Thank you for those comments. I appreciate it. We'll make sure the folks know that. Our last presentation is from John Williams, our Senior Vice President of Engineering and Construction. As you know, our employees do a great job every day. You just saw that in those last slides, but they also do some extraordinary things, what I call above and beyond the call of duty. And today I've asked John to recognize 2 of our employees who did that very thing this last couple months, to recognize them for what they've done. So, John.
Thanks, Gabe. Josh set me up well because I get to keep bragging on our folks. As you all know, each December, we've spent some time at our board meeting talking about examples of employee excellence, and we've always got a lot of those that we're really proud of. We've put a new twist on it, hopefully advancing that effort this year with being a little bit more timely with that, and recognizing them a little bit more in real time as they come. And I've got 2 great stories today. You can see them over there. They're the ones that are dressed like they actually work for a living. So got Ed Moore. He's in blue there. Ed's been with us since 2007. He works in overhead construction. I'll talk about him in just a moment as well. And then James Parrott in the brown there. He's been with us since 2018. He works in underground construction. And I'll start with James. He was working along with a newer employee, Cole Johnson, who had been with us since October in a training rotation with James, and they were doing a new gas service order at a residence. Got there, made some pleasantries with a resident who told them just to let him know if they need anything. So after they'd been doing some work, they actually needed access to the backyard, knocked on the door, and the gentleman said he would unlock the gate for them. James noticed that the gentleman kind of had to lean on the door a little bit, maybe a little bit disoriented, but went back, continued some work for a little bit. The gentleman didn't come back out to unlock the gate, so he went to check on him, knocked on the door, no answer, called, couldn't get him to respond, left a message. As he walked back to his truck, noticed the gentleman had disabled veterans tags on his car, so he called his supervisor, Jason Heller. They talked through it real quick and decided to call Knox County Sheriff's Department for a well check. When they got there, they found that the gentleman had a seizure and had passed out inside the home. So, what he did was really awesome, being able to be conscientious enough for that. The gentleman, when we kind of got things together later that evening, was checking his phone and saw where James had called him, and called him back, thanked him for it, and then in addition to that, called his manager, Doug Miller, who's back there in the blue jacket. There's Doug. And they chatted for a little bit. Doug learned that he was a disabled veteran, had issues with some seizures in the past, was super grateful. Also shared that he had moved here recently, and where he was from, he wasn't so sure that the people would have taken the time or the care to do what James had done. So that obviously means a lot about our community in general. But in doing that, he did ask that we put a letter in his jacket, which I learned is a military term for putting a letter in his file. So we're doing that for sure. But in addition to that, we want to make sure that we recognize James on behalf of he and Cole and Jason Heller, who was involved in that. So James, if you could just please stand up. I want to give you a round of applause. I think what he does, what he did, kind of shows the compassion that a lot of our folks have and doing the right thing when they're out in the field working with our customers. And Ed's story's no different. It's a little bit shorter, but he was working a service call, he's a troubleman. He's an electric first responder in our overhead construction group. There was a electric service pole that was leaning. He got a trouble call for that, went out there. An elderly lady was there kind of showing him where it was, and when she got there, they were talking. I got to get this quote right. She grabbed his arm and said, "I've never felt pain like that, honey," and then she collapsed. Ed very quickly called system operations. They actually have a direct dial with 911, and of course our system operations group knows the location of our folks, so sped things up a little bit. Ed began doing CPR and did that for a while, I believe, and until the EMTs got there. They were able to get a pulse when they got there after doing some more work while Ed rested, and then transported her to the hospital. Unfortunately, later she had another episode and passed away. But what Ed did at least helped kind of get a fighting chance, and his work was exceptionally commendable. And another kind of anecdote there as well, there was another person, not KUB, on site that witnessed it as well, but didn't have the ability to stay there to help. He had, it just, some people can't deal with those things. And so Ed stayed and did those things when others couldn't. So I want to thank Ed for being different and for tackling that, having the courage to do it, and honestly the wherewithal to keep his wits together in a really scary situation. So Ed, if you don't mind, please stand up and give you. You know, Ed and James are just examples of a lot of KUB employees that interact with our customers every day. Certainly they dealt with something unusual that we hope never happens, but it's just really awesome that when it does, we have folks like them to step up. They're both very special people. They show genuine care, and we're just grateful to work alongside folks like them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to say it's not only special with the kind of people that they are, but also to the skill set that KUB has and you have in recognizing the need for that. And not everyone, like you said, would have the wherewithal and the wits to do that and to pay attention to what's going on around them. So we appreciate it.
I just want to say, Ed and James, just say kudos. Thank you for what you do day in and day out, not just in those situations, but what you do for KUB. And I will tell you that I'm sitting here just a little full, a little emotional, just because I know, how having somebody who has that awareness can really help change and save somebody's life and impact their family. And so I just want to say thank you for your quick wit and being present and doing what you would hope any human being would do to help another human being. And so you all are the true heroes, so thank you.
Our April 20th financial session will focus on the details of the fiscal year 24 budget, as we've heard from Mark. We will begin with the brief business meeting at 9 a.m. Public comments will be welcome before the meeting is adjourned. Following the conclusion of the business meeting, we will begin the budget workshop, so we're all looking forward to that. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the board today? Okay. Thank you. So following the adjournment of this meeting, the board will have a lunch session that is open for the public to observe. This meeting is adjourned.